Hey everybody, I'm Amber. Welcome to my channel if you're new around here, or welcome back to my channel. I am currently 17 weeks postpartum after having my first baby, and today I am sitting down and I am telling you 6 things that I did not know about labor and birth. And I did a good amount of research about the labor and delivery process because I had an unmedicated home birth. That was the way I planned it. So I wanted to make sure that I was like as prepared as possible. And I know one of these 6 things, the first thing I'm going to talk about is like the burning question that most first-time moms have. But then some of these were things that I just like didn't even think to look up because I didn't know that it was a thing. So hopefully this is helpful if you're a first-time mama and labor is approaching, or even if you just like ever want to get pregnant. I think that, you know, it's always good to know what could be around the corner. So that being said, let's just get right into it. Okay, so the first thing that I did not know, and this is one that like you really can't know until you go through labor, but that is that contractions do not feel like period cramps. And I guess this might be personal to every single person because we all perceive pain and discomfort differently, but of course, a lot of people ask what contractions feel like and then do they feel like period cramps. In my experience, they were much different than period cramps. They started out feeling very similar to period cramps, but for me, period cramps are more like an aching kind of a feeling. And when I have my period, I can't say now after birth how it's gonna be, but at least always before birth, my period cramps were very intense. Like I used to pass out when I was younger, and at this point I think I can say that I don't have a super low pain tolerance, so I did not pass out because I was a baby. You know, I passed out because of the amount of blood loss and because my cramps were pretty intense, but they always were more of like an aching feeling. And I would always describe it as like, it felt like someone was just like squeezing my like uterus area, like this kind of just like squeezing. But contractions for me felt like squeezing also, but more like this. It's like the only way I know how to explain it. Like it didn't feel like things were being like twisted. It felt like squeezing in and down, like everything in my uterus abdomen area was just squeezing in and down. That was how it felt. And so I don't feel like you can fully compare it to period cramps. You know, I mean, they're both pain in the same area, but they're different. And part of what makes contractions so intense is that you're feeling that squeezing, but then you're also feeling pressure down there from your baby's head or bottom if they're coming the other way. But you know, from their head pushing down as you're feeling those contractions. So that was the first thing that I didn't know. But again, you can't really know that until you've done it. But there you go. If you're wondering, that was my experience at least. The second thing I didn't know is that contractions do not always have a consistent pattern. Everyone preaches, well, maybe not everyone, but a lot of people preach this stronger, longer, closer together pattern that you're supposed to be experiencing. And that's how allegedly you're supposed to know that labor is progressing. So your contractions are supposed to be getting stronger, they're supposed to be lasting longer, and then the amount of time in between is going to get less and less and less. That did not really happen for me. They definitely got, you know, stronger, but even then they weren't getting monumentally stronger. They were getting stronger in increments. I mean, so much so that I almost didn't really notice until I was close to transition. And then I was like, oh yeah, they're getting stronger. But as far as longer and closer together, they were not consistent at all. There would be a few contractions where I would note, okay, those are definitely longer and then closer together. And then there'd be a few contractions where they would be 5-6 minutes in between. And the contractions would sometimes be 30 seconds or a minute after having been 3 minutes and a couple minutes apart. So there just was not a lot of consistency. And actually, one of my girlfriends who had her baby exactly 1 week after I did noticed the same thing, that she was not having this super consistent pattern. For me, this is partly why I didn't think I was in labor. And I talked about my birth story. I'll link that video up here, one of these sides. I can never remember which size. I'll link it up here, but I didn't think I was in labor until the very, very end of labor. And that's partly why, because I had been taught to watch out for this pattern, and this pattern wasn't happening. And so I was like, well, it can't be labor. So in my experience, that is not always the case. You can be in labor without having this pattern that I guess most women experience. The third thing that I did not know about was this uncontrollable shaking that you might experience towards the end and after labor. So when I was pushing, in between those contractions, just when I was pushing, I was shaking like a leaf. And then also for about 30 minutes to an hour, I can't remember exactly how long it was, but it was a while, 30 minutes to an hour after labor, I also was shaking. Or after I had my baby, I mean, I was shaking. And it wasn't because I was cold or anything like that. I just was, like I said, just shaken. And so much so that I asked my midwife or doula, should I be holding my baby while I'm shaking this much? And they were like, yeah, it's fine. He'll just bounce along with you, which he did. And so of course I had to look this up. And it looks like nobody fully knows why that happens. It doesn't happen to everybody, but it happens to around 50% of women. And so some of the theories are that you've lost a lot of fluid, so you might start shaking, or that your body has done such hard work during the labor process. The one that makes the most sense to me is that towards the end of labor and afterwards, you have such a dramatic shift in hormones that it causes your body to react that way. So that one makes the most sense to me, but I was not prepared for that. So I definitely was asking my midwife, is this okay while I was in labor and then also afterwards? The fourth thing that I did not know would happen, or at least I didn't know it would happen for me, and I was pleasantly surprised by this one, was how okay I felt in between contractions throughout labor. Specifically though, how okay I felt in between the contractions where I was pushing my son out. Those were the ones that were the most surprising to me, because I knew during most contractions that you probably would feel kind of okay. I've heard some women say that they felt okay, and then I've heard some women say that they felt still kind of like a dull ache in between contractions, but it still felt like a break compared to what the full-blown contraction felt like. I definitely felt totally fine in between all my contractions. So much so that I was just falling asleep in between contractions during labor. But like I said, I was really surprised that in between those contractions where I was pushing, even as my son was crowning, I still felt totally fine. During the contraction, I was like, oh, it hurts, because it does kind of hurt, you know. But then once the contraction would stop and I would take a break, even as his head was starting to peek out, I really felt okay. So that, and I'll actually link a clip of me saying, I can't believe I feel so okay in between these contractions while I was in labor. But yeah.
And it's crazy how I feel okay right now, but then once it starts, I'm like, oh my god, I'm gonna die. But you're not. No.
That was really surprising, because I didn't think as a head is coming out of your private parts down there that you would feel just like, oh yeah, I can just relax here and it's fine. So that was actually really, really nice. And hopefully that if you're near labor and delivery, hopefully that kind of makes you feel better, that maybe even as you're pushing, you might still feel okay intermittently, at least in my experience. It's not like you're just in pain for like an hour or two of pushing. Okay, the fifth thing that I did not know about labor is that it might not be as bad as you think it's going to be. And I think that this has a lot to do with how much you prepare and also how your laboring environment is set up and how comfortable you are. Because I had my son at home and I labored for most of the 9 hours completely by myself, by choice. It wasn't because no one was offering to help. I didn't think I was in labor, and then because of that, my team was not here until the end, and my husband kept asking me if I was okay and if I needed anything, but because I didn't think I was in labor, I kept sending him away to go sleep. But I really think a big part of that is because I was in my own home, in my own room. It was dark. I mean, it was calm. It was at night. And so I just felt, I think, as comfortable as I possibly could during that phase of discomfort. And that's not to say that you have to have labor at home to experience that. I think you definitely can be comfortable in a hospital, but you maybe just have to be a little bit more intentional about asking to like turn the lights down, or like maybe bring some things that make you feel comfortable and relaxed. I don't know, whatever it is that makes you feel relaxed and comfortable, do that, create that environment, because I really think that that makes a big difference. And that was a huge reason why I didn't think that I was in labor, was because I felt like it was not as bad as I thought it was going to be. And so I kept thinking, this can't be it, because it's supposed to be the most painful thing that you've ever experienced. And it definitely is intense. It is painful. There is pain involved, and it is uncomfortable. But I had built it up so much in my head that when the real thing was happening, like I said, I don't feel like that was the worst pain that a human could go through. But again, I do think there are a lot of things that factor into that experience. I didn't have like a lot of fear around labor, and so I think that really helped me relax as much as I could during those contractions. But I'm just saying, I definitely think that you might be surprised about how not intense it is, but how manageable labor actually can be if things are progressing normally. Okay, and the last thing that I did not know, this actually is not really about labor and delivery, it kind of is. But the last thing is that, in my opinion, again, postpartum was so much worse than labor and delivery, because postpartum is weeks and weeks and weeks of pain and swelling down there and bleeding and sore, raw nipples. Hopefully your nipples aren't sore and raw for weeks, but definitely for like the first week or two, at least for me, they were very, very sore and raw. Although labor and delivery was intense, my labor and delivery lasted 9 hours, but even for people who have longer ones, I think that 2 to 3 days is generally the max that like a doctor or midwife will let it go before they're like, okay, we need to get this baby out like now. If anyone has had a different experience, please let me know in the comments. I'd be interested to hear. But generally speaking, you're not going to be in labor for like weeks. But postpartum is weeks and weeks and weeks. And of course, it's going to vary. For me, it was about 6 weeks. After 6 weeks, I started to feel pretty normal again. And like myself, I wasn't bleeding at that point and all that. But yeah, I just was not a fan of like the tenderness, the burning when you pee, the sore, tender breasts, like wearing pads for 6 weeks. Oh my gosh, that was actually the worst thing. I got so sick of wearing pads and diapers because it just gets like moist and disgusting down there, and then it gets irritated because it's so moist. And I actually have a whole video about things during postpartum that shocked me. I will link that up here as well. Check that out for sure if you are pregnant, because that is one thing that I think we forget to prepare for, or if we do prepare, we just kind of do like some minimal preparations, but definitely check out that video. But anyway, yeah, I was not a fan of postpartum. And also keep in mind that I did not have any complications, I didn't tear, and I still thought that postpartum was much worse than labor and birth. So I can only imagine if you had like a really bad tear or a C-section, then I feel like it would be even worse than labor and delivery. So that was my experience, and those are the 6 things that I did not know about labor and birth. I hope that you found this helpful. If there were any things that shocked you about labor or delivery or even postpartum, put it in the comments down below, because I would be super interested to know. I feel like labor, delivery, postpartum, it's all so interesting, and it's just crazy how a lot of us have similar but at the same time totally different experiences. So definitely let me know in the comments. It'd also be good for other mamas to know if there's anything that they should maybe be prepared for. Give this video a thumbs up if you liked it. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button so that you don't miss any of my future videos, and I will catch you in the next one. Bye!